Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Romania's political landscape is undergoing significant upheaval ahead of the May 2025 presidential elections. The Constitutional Court recently barred candidate Călin Georgescu from the race, citing campaign law violations and alleged foreign interference. In response, right-wing parties are scrambling to nominate replacements. Contenders for the race, meanwhile, include a coalition of pro-European parties. This electoral turmoil has sparked debates about Romania's democratic integrity and geopolitical orientation. Joining us today on TVP World to provide deeper insight into these developments is Cristina Cileacu, senior correspondent at Digi24 TV. Hello, ma'am, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation. Good morning.
All right. So before we dive into the interview there, we do have a statement made from the now barred candidate Georgescu. Let's take a look.
And after everything that happened today at the Constitutional Court in the last few months, I tell you that I will stand firm in my fight for freedom, democracy, peace and dignity. If you want to support any person by signing new candidate lists, please do it as your conscience dictates. It seems that in these moments, democracy and freedom are taking their last breath. And that is why we need now, more than ever, to show democratically and peacefully that our choice matters until the last moment. So yes, we were also wrong to leave 35 years to everyone else, the European Union for money, NATO for defence, and the United States of America to save us even from the wrong election outcomes. This is how we have come to depend on others, and now we find ourselves unable to decide for ourselves.
All right, so a lot to unpack here. And first of all, I was wondering, how has the disqualification of Georgescu impacted Romania's right-wing politics? Do you think that a new appointee from his political coalition will step up and take his place in the next elections?
I would say it's a very crowded lane, this lane of so-called sovereignist parties, people that want to follow Georgescu's lead because he didn't appoint by name a single person. He avoided using names. Therefore, there are a lot of runners now struggling to get the attention of Georgescu's public, and trying to be as convincing as he was when it comes to this type of ideas. He believes that he is the only democratic solution, but I can assure that for the moment, Romania is democratic enough, having both European Union and NATO membership as one of its main important goals, and one of its main goals for the future, I should say, because Romanians want deeply to remain in both these organizations. So it's a huge fight now, who can be the replacer of Călin Georgescu. We have the party leader AUR, which is George Simion. He wants to take a big chunk of this public. Also, there is another young lady called Ana Maria Gavrila. She represents the party of the young people. They have a small representative portion in our parliament, but the public of Călin Georgescu, if we watch at least the social media networks, as you know, probably TikTok and other social media are favorite by this type of public, and they don't seem to agree with these two names in order to replace Călin Georgescu. So we'll see what happens, considering the fact that tomorrow is actually the final day when people who want to run for the job of the president of Romania can subscribe their name to for the election.
All right, we've recently seen a lot of protests on the streets of Romania. I'm wondering, well, you're closer to the ground. Can you help us understand how are the Romanians taking this idea that a candidate is barred after elections have taken place?
Well, as we recently saw, we had some violent protests in the city center, and it was immediately after the Constitutional Court rejected for good the candidacy of Călin Georgescu. So most of those people that support Călin Georgescu, we have to say, are not violent people, are just people who believe that full system change should be done in Romania. It's their opinion. It's a democracy, so we have to respect this opinion. But those that use violence, most of this type of supporters of Călin Georgescu were also encouraged to use violence, because some people using a lot of money to back up Călin Georgescu during his previous electoral campaign were actually delivering all sorts of messages on social media in order to get people on the streets. They were encouraging former militaries and former members of secret service to exit on the streets all over Romania, not just in Bucharest, and to protest and to arrest all those that oppose to the candidacy of Călin Georgescu. Of course, this didn't happen because this type of people don't even live in Romania anymore. They live abroad because here in Romania they are wanted for illegal actions. And therefore, it's easy to be somewhere like in Dubai, for instance, and to people in Romania to create violence on the streets. But that protest in particular was a singular one. Since then, we saw violence on the streets of Bucharest, at least, or anywhere else in Romania, I should say. People can protest if they don't agree with this decision, of course, but violence, it's a thing that we don't want to see again in Romania. And so far, everybody looks a bit disappointed of this, but no more protests, at least for the moment.
All right. You just mentioned earlier that Romania's path remains within the EU, remain within the West, and this is what most Romanians want. But how do we explain Georgescu's oversized 40% support polling right now? Does it have anything to do with his personal brand of politics, or do you think it's mostly the foreign interference that you were talking about?
I think it's mostly the foreign interference, because Călin Georgescu's idea, if you really listen to him, it's a very good mix, I should say, between religion, which is important in Romania, the Orthodox religion, mysticism, and also some sorts of saying that decisions are taken from abroad, mainly from or from NATO as well, simply because Romania is not sovereign enough, and why he wanted to bring back sovereignty. It's a paradox. We don't even understand it, because if we look at the results, around 80%, which is a big number of Romanian population living in the country or abroad, they want to be both in European Union and in NATO. So people in Romania do understand what these advantages mean. On the other, people, especially those living abroad that want to return back in Romania, have a sort of mixed feeling, because some of them probably are not completely integrated in the societies they live now, or integrated but not satisfied with their lives, I should say, and they want in Romania, but here the economical conditions are not okay. So they blame everything on the current power leading Romania. Therefore, anyone coming from outside this system is seen like a sort of a savior. As I mentioned, mysticism was a big part of these speeches that Călin Georgescu was throwing into the public eye. So it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain even for ourselves, but it's something that we see that is slowly fading. Because, as I already, of the current runners that wanted to gain public of Georgescu, so far at least, don't seem to manage to do that.
Right, like you rightfully mentioned, the situation is quite complicated, and it's really hard to explain where the support is coming from. But from an outsider's perspective, in terms of international perception, especially when it comes to the United States looking into the Romanian situation, there's been a lot of criticisms when it comes to the state of democracy of the country. How would you explain to them what exactly happened within Romania and why it is imperative for the election to be annulled?
Well, even the Polish president criticized us recently for the same reason. Indeed, cancel election, I would say, is not democratic. Till here, I would say everyone is right. On the other hand, when you have a candidate that appears out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, using a very shady campaign, he pretend to pay 0 lei, it's our national currency, for his campaign. And then after you discover more and more evidence that were shown in the public eye as well by the Romanian authorities, you understand why it was actually needed, even though it looks not democratic, to cancel the elections, because the rest of the candidates that participated to the November elections have very transparent campaigns. Everybody was explaining where they have their money, who is behind them, and so on, like it should. Well, this candidate that got most of the votes wasn't able to prove his finance. And when people started to take a closer look to his finance and who was behind him, they discover Russian meddling. They discover all sorts of shady people in Romania with all sorts of shady interests. This type of former military mercenaries of Romania, with extremely violent behavior and extremely violent expressions, most of them with some when Nazis. And it's a very weird, in a way, decision, but then again, it's a very neat decision, because as I said, I agree is not democratic to cancel election, but then again, you have to make sure that those elections, Romanians, not something coming from abroad imposed to Romanians. And for the moment, this is the case. And somehow, criticism also from United States shows that our authorities didn't communicate well, and I think the Romanian public agrees with that, because these peoples are extremely pro-Russian. Everything they said and everything they promoted was against all the Western values and all the democratic values. In the same time, some people from mostly from MAGA movement of United States confused this type of neo-communism. These people are with the ideas that MAGA movement has in United States, and there are very, very opposed things. So it's indeed a need of a better explanation for all this, right, in order not for Romanians to understand, but also for the people across the borders.
Right. We have a little bit of time. I want to get in the last question, because I'm also wondering if whichever candidate is to take Georgescu's place and still kind of inherit this kind of, let's say, more foreign-friendly or Russian-friendly rhetoric, will they also be barred from running, or the results be annulled?
I think not. For the moment, now there are a lot of scrutinies regarding the very well the candidates that applies for this position. So tomorrow that would be the end of enlist to this position to participate, to run for the presidency, and then I think the elections will go naturally, and the bell will win.
Right. Thank you so much for all your input and insight and helping us unpack this really complicated issue. Thanks again for being with us on TVP World. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.